From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
We'll start our day now. And so we have 4 perspectives that we've sort of chopped up the day into. And the first one is what we call our technical perspective. And so for the next hour, we're going to focus on what we call institutional approaches to processing and archiving email. And each of our speakers will present for around 15 minutes. And then we'll follow with Q&A. And I'll introduce all of our speakers now to save time. So our first speaker is Ricc Ferrante. He's the Information Technology Archivist and Director of Digital Services, and Lynda Schmitz Fuhrig, the Electronic Records Archivist, and they are from the Smithsonian Institution Archives. They'll be followed by Jaime Schumacher, the Director of Scholarly Communications at Northern Illinois University Libraries and the co-PI on the Digital POWRR Project. And then Cathy Jordan, the Digital Initiatives and Web Services Manager from the Library of Virginia. So Ricc and Lynda, do you have, Erin is going to now help me with this computer, because once you get up in front of a microphone in front of people, then you don't know how any of this works anymore. So Erin will help.
So, good morning. A little bit about the Smithsonian Institution Archives. We are not the only archives at the Smithsonian. There are several others. We are focused on the history of the Smithsonian and its many museums and scientific research centers. And we're going to talk about a couple of different tools that we're in the process of using. So let me give you a little context. Our starting point, we have taken in email that goes back to Elm. The institution, it works more like a federated group. So the museums like to be very autonomous, and it's only in the early 2000s that things got standardized. So we've seen Elm, CC Mail, Netscape Communicator, Lotus Notes. This all sounds very familiar. When I came on board 12 years ago, we were using GroupWise, and we flipped to Outlook. And then, as you well know, when Microsoft created Outlook 2010, they changed very much how it operated underneath. And that is where we are today. So along the way, we issued guidance, which quite similar to where NARA has been, was email could be a record, and you needed to treat it as an important record. And that was the extent of the guidance that we had at that point in time. If you kept it electronically, you needed to make sure you kept it, or you could print it out. At the institution at that point in time, we very much thought about email as voicemail. We're still in the process at that point in time of thinking about email as a historical or an official record. In addition, our IT group handled large accounts by deleting the oldest email, which is often the things that we care the most about. When we moved from GroupWise to Outlook, anything that wasn't in the GroupWise cabinet was left behind unless somebody specifically asked the IT group to move it forward. So we know that there was a lot of email that was lost at that point in time. And there has been no established mechanism for identifying and capturing the historically valuable email. We don't refuse deposits of email on the basis of format. Much of our material comes to us after it's no longer being used, when it's stuffed in the accessions with other material. So most of the Born Digital material we get is mixed in with paper and DATs and other formats. So we will get any kind of thing that way, and we have to deal with it. So in 2005, we teamed up with Rockefeller Archive Center to to address this issue and figure a way to deal with this situation, to find a tool and a workflow that will allow us to deal with that variety of material. They had a similar situation. And so we ended up with the Collaborative Electronic Records Project, the SERP, and we created a parser, and along with that, teaming up with North Carolina and Kentucky, worked out a schema for that, which is known now by a different name, but it was the email account preservation syntax. Our objectives is durable access, so we want to use non-proprietary standard-based formats. We want it to be manageable. It was very important to us to keep the context. That meant any kind of organization that somebody had done with their accounts reflected something important, something of value, and we wanted to be able to retain that. We didn't want to lose any of the information that was in the actual messages, even if you didn't see that information on the screen. And we wanted it to require a low amount of resources. So we have been using in production, if you will, the SERP methodology and tools that were developed as part of that project. And we are focusing on the key organization record creators, so individuals like the secretary, the undersecretaries, museum directors, and we're grabbing their whole accounts at the point that they depart the institution. So if they've been there for 30 years and have worked in a number of capacities, everything that's in their account is what we capture at that point in time.
So with the SERP model, we followed OAIS, and with the source email, that was considered to be the SIP, and we're talking about proprietary formats here typically. We're dealing with MS Exchange, so we're talking about the PST files that come to us. In order to work with our preservation component of the SERP model, we needed the files to be transformed into the MBox format. So we were able to come up with a tool, a parsing tool that was developed in Squeak, and that it could run off a thumb drive or a local machine. So then the AIP is made up of the source email, the MBox files. We also have our XML preservation file, message logs that come out of the parser, and any other additional information, an accession note about processing, and that is our AIP. So this is what the parser looked like. It was created for small to mid-sized organizations to use, especially ones where there might not be a lot of technical skill in the office. And we had created very detailed instructions for people to install it, and also had taught some workshops for SAA for people to get it running in their organizations. So taking the MBox file from the account, the parsing tool creates the XML file with all the encoded attachments in base 64, as well as those message logs that contain subject information, sender, to, date, and it created a hash on each email message as well. So with this parsing tool, we get the XML, and we have the entire structure of the account. So we have our file layout of the account's folder message tree structure. So if somebody had an inbox, and then projects folder, and then folders within those folders, the XML is following that. The content is not limited to what the email client would typically display. So we're able to see transmission information, which I know is a little hard to see here, but this is important to have for the integrity and authenticity of the account and the messages. As mentioned earlier, we worked with the North Carolina State Archives to co-develop the XML preservation schema, which is now known as Email Account XML Schema, EAXS. And while XML is human and machine readable, it's not very pretty, and it's difficult, for a researcher to work with, especially when files get very large. So the way access works currently, either we go back to the source account and a copy, look at it in its client, or do searching through the XML, or rely on the message logs. So essentially all we have is the raw XML. We weren't able to develop a style sheet during the project. So since last year, we've been working on developing some additional tools to deal with our email while maintaining our structure, the SERP model, as well as the use of the email account XML schema. So this is known as the dark mail suite or dark archive mail. Excuse me. As I mentioned earlier, SERP parser was written in Squeak, which is a subset of Smalltalk, which may have scared off some organizations from trying to use. Darkmail is actually Python-based, which more people should be familiar with, and it's not reliant on email client software, and again works with MBox files. It's been tested both in Windows and Mac. So with the Darkmail tool, the files are loaded from the account into a MySQL database, and once that's set, there's various ways you can search within Darkmail. The first page you see here shows the directory folders and then the number of messages that are in all those folders. And you're able to search by body text, sender, subject, date, and so on. And you can indicate if you want to search plain text or if you want to search HTML or do both. And this is a search of the .doc extension, and these are all the messages that come up. And then once you select a message, you can view it and then choose to download the attachment for outside of the database. So here's plain text message, very straightforward. And then here's one that's in HTML with its hyperlink. So the other component of the suite is something that we're calling the Dark XML tool. And this does not require MySQL for it. This is only to get the XML preservation. And the tool is giving us more flexibility than the SERP parser did. We've done some initial testing with it, and we're finding that the throughput is much faster than what we were getting before, but it's still very early in development, so we need to do a little bit more with that. But I'm hopeful that it'll help us deal better with the large scale of emails that we've gotten since SERP concluded. We have an option now to split out the XML file because once XML files get too big, they're hard to open and validate and view. And then we also set it so the attachments can be separated out as well according to size. With SERP, it was set at 25K. So here's some valid XML that comes out. Again, we're still using the XML schema. And this is one of the encoded attachments. It's XML wrap, just like it was with the SERP parser. And it references back to the XML. And we're still doing the message logs as well. So these new tools are building off the SERP foundation with something that we hope is more efficient. We're able to do processing, work within it for appraisal and research, as well as creating the preservation files of the account. So it's working to be a good internal tool for us so far.
So what has happened with our move to Darkmail, which is digital archive mail, is where we got that name from, is our focus is on capturing senior officials, and those email accounts, when we capture them, are single accessions, but can be larger than 250,000 emails. So we have issues of scale that we are able to deal with. The SERP parser was very manual, so we were taking things in. We would accept unsolicited email. We work with our IT group to deal with those accounts. The appraisal process was done solely off of the subject sender log. Now we're able to put it into Darkmail and do some review before we finalize the accession. Since we still have the subject sender log, we're still leaning on that a little, but as Darkmail solidifies, we'll be able to do that automatically and then begin the preservation process without having to leave the tool. It also means that our reference staff can come back and use that tool. So we have a little bit more flexibility with there. We don't have a pressing issue with regards to access because all of the email that we've taken in at this point in time has a 15-year embargo. This is where it fits in with other tools. The SERP parser gave us the capture and the normalization and the packaging stages of the life cycle. With darkmail, we can take that red box for UI for archival processing and begin to turn it a little bit towards green, but not 100% yet. Thank you.
Yours wasn't folded, right?
Yeah.
Do you just, this one? Okay. Do you need anything else pulled up right now?
No,
Okay.
just,
Hi, everyone. I am Jaime Schumacher, and I am here on behalf of actually the POWRR Project. I work at Northern Illinois University now, but I am still co-PI on the POWRR Project. And I want to speak today about the perspectives of smaller organizations. And just to help get our minds around what I mean by smaller organization, these are organizations that are interested in retaining records and other items of cultural heritage importance for the long term, but they're dealing with things like they're very, very small in size. These would be Lone Ranger type organizations. They might have very restricted budgets. They're also going to have restricted IT infrastructure. If someone does not tend to take a selfie in front of your organization pretty much daily, like they probably do at the Smithsonian and the National Archives, you might be a smaller organization. So the POWRR Project was intended to study and make recommendations on different digital preservation solutions for these very small organizations. And that's why I'm here, is to represent those organizations as we talk about email archiving, let you know what approaches they are taking, and give you maybe a couple of use cases for them. We're looking for organizations where email correspondence is not just kept about the organization itself, but about the local people. For instance, my father's mail that he received from his father when he was in World War II came through letters. And these are now in the archives of a very small institution in Chester, Illinois. The messages I received from my father when he was deployed at Desert Storm were via email, and these are languishing in my Hotmail inbox, and there really is no way to get these to a really small organization locally that can help take care of those. So that's kind of the perspective that I'm coming from. Are we good? Excellent. Okay. So at Northern Illinois University, which is actually a medium-sized institution, but it's where I'm coming from, we consider ourselves having a restricted budget. This year we're having 20% budget cuts after years and years of budget cuts. So we're really struggling with funding. And we have a head of special collections and rare books, Lynn Thomas, who is pretty much the only professional in her division that's trying to steward the items that she has. She has landed the Science Fiction Writers of America archives. And one of those things that the archives is looking to preserve are the correspondence of the authors. Lynn was notified by one of the authors she collects that he had a very aggressive form of cancer, and indicated that he had some emails that she may want to preserve. So their solution was for him to forward those emails to a Gmail account that she would then have access to, and he passed away 3 months later. So those emails are now in a Gmail account that our rare book and special collection curator has access to, but she just doesn't know what to do with them. So one of the things that we're doing is just a simple triage approach. We have these, they probably should not stay in Gmail. Who knows what was lost? I believe he only forwarded items that he had put in his folders. We didn't get any of his sent folder, and some of you involved with email archiving already knows what a loss that can be not to get the sent items. So what we're having Lynn do is simply exporting those through the Gmail export function and then running a very basic triage tool on that item so that we can capture something like a checksum, for instance. And most importantly, to capture the metadata about that email archive. If the emails sit long enough, the backlogs at these institutions can be pretty huge, as I'm sure they are at your institutions. Yes, big backlogs, yes. So what we can do now is capture the metadata about this email archive. And this is just one tool that we've been using in the POWRR workshops that we're teaching smaller organizations how to approach digital preservation across the country. This is just one of the items tools that we're talking about there. And the result is an XML file. We're not converting the email export file into any other more normalized format. I'm very interested in the SERP parser because I think that may be helpful to Lynn. But what this does do is it forces the archivist from a state of anxiety and inaction to actually doing something. By creating this XML file, she's doing something. She's captured metadata. She ran a checksum on it. It is now out there in some format other than just sitting in a Gmail inbox. So that's what we call the triage approach at smaller organizations. So essentially just getting it into the workflow. Another approach these really small organizations are taking is to just simply farm it out. These are organizations that probably have absolutely no IT support. They're usually lone arrangers, but they have small budgets. I work with one gal who is an archivist at a very, very small private institution, and she does have some funding, but absolutely no IT resources herself. So she is farming out the work to Preservica. For some of the smaller organizations, they have a hosted solution. So all she needs is a web browser to make this happen. She can export her items, and then Preservica will do all of this for her. So it migrates the whatever format she had it in, whether it was a Lotus Notes, a PST, an MBox. I think they're coming out with this month, MSG formats. It migrates those to an .eml. It separates the attachments for her and normalizes those. And then in the future, it will migrate those attachments forward to preservation-friendly formats. And then, but it maintains the link for her to the original emails so that she can access it all together. It keeps for her the conversational links that are in the emails. So she's able to maintain the back and forth over time of the conversations. And once she's ready to make those emails accessible to the public, when they see it, it's going to be in like a very familiar format to them. It's going to look like an email with the attachments. So she went with this vendor-based approach, and this is costing, I think, $4,000 a year. To have this hosted, and she gets so many gigabytes of storage. But the nice thing is that once she does all the processing and stuff, she can still copy them back locally and keep a local copy of it in case she ever wants to do away with that vendor relationship. And this is the most popular approach for the smallest of organizations, and even the medium-sized organizations, and it appears even the largest organizations, that print key is still a very viable, usable tool for the smallest of organizations. And I just want to say that these small institutions, they are ready and eager for solutions. I mentioned the workshops that we're doing. We have created a day-long hands-on workshop where the students actually practice using things like data accession or on their laptops. And we're going across the country to do these because these organizations don't have travel budgets. So I will be in Deadwood, South Dakota in November, right? We're going all over the place and reaching out to these folks. And in the first iteration of the POWRR Project, which was funded by the IMLS, we were able to conduct 6 of these workshops, and we reached 165 institutions. The interesting thing is 3 months after the workshop, we surveyed, and we were able to successfully send out 139 surveys. We got 71 responses. 70% of those folks had initiated digital preservation activities in the 3 months following the workshop. So they're eager, they're ready. They recognize that these digital materials, and God, they asked me about email at every workshop. And up until about a month ago, I didn't really have a good answer to them, other than that print key, right? Print it out, put it in an archival friendly box. Yeah. So they are ready for solutions, but they have to be usable by even small volunteer-run organizations. One of the tools we have folks use is Internet Archive. You can load your stuff up to Internet Archive and it's free. They just didn't get it. So we created screenshot tutorials in large font for those volunteers that are working at these volunteer-only organizations that have important stuff that the future yous will want to see. These are the correspondence that are essentially the threads that holds the quilt patches together. We preserve things at the national level, these big events that happen, or at least we try to, right? These big events. Well, what these folks have to offer are the threads that stitch together those events, and they're just as vital. And I think they're ready for solutions, and I'm really excited to hear what's going to come out of the symposium, and hopefully have some things to offer to them in the next 12 months. Thank you.
There's that folder, and then that one.
Okay. This takes a sec. Ooh, too big. No. Okay. Good morning. Oh, look at everybody. We were in the front. We didn't see everybody who was here. Hey, how about that? Oh, hold on. I had to go all cowboy and do a Prezi instead of a PowerPoint. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can get it big. Yeah, big. There we go. It's coming. Ooh, it's coming. Hope you took your Dramamine today. I'm Cathy Jordan. I'm Digital Initiatives and Web Services Manager at the Library of Virginia. I'm going to dumb it down a whole lot for y'all. I don't have, we rely heavily on Google to find things that we need to use. But before that, I'll tell you about kind of the reason why we started working on the Kane email. In early 2011, my colleague, Roger Chrisman, walked into my office and he said, hey, Tim Kaine's running for Senate. We should probably make some of his records available. And I said, yeah, I guess we should. And so we had, like many institutions, had suffered some resource losses. We'd had other focuses. We had some key staff leave, right, Don? Right, Don Chalfant from the National Archives. We had some people leave us right after the transfer. So what we did was we gathered together a group of colleagues from the various parts of the library, public services staff, IT staff, which I'm IT staff, but I'm IT staff, just so you know, records management, and Roger, and I think maybe a couple of your colleagues from archives description, as well as our public information officer, because we knew as we started talking about making governor's records, electronic records available or dealing with them in some way, there would be an interest at the higher levels about what we were up to. So we got together and we met and we had a lot of questions. We've had 2 transfers. We had Mark Warner's governor's records transferred to us electronically, as well as Tim Kane's, and we had to have a discussion about what we were going to do. Where were we? What were our priorities? We were going to look at preservation. We were going to look at access. How were we going to make access available? What kind of resources would we need, financial as well as staff? We don't have, I mean, we may be a state library and archives, but we're not, I don't actually consider us a large institution. I mean, the building's pretty big, but staff-wise, we don't have that many people focused in any one area. We're spread out a lot. We do a lot of different stuff. And how would we implement? How are we going to do it? And we also decided as a team that whatever we decided, we were going to make sure it was good for us. It was something we could do and that we believed in, and that despite what all of our friends at the various conferences were talking about, we were going to kind of, unless someone's like, we got it, we were going to hold steady with what we wanted to do and be okay with what we were not prepared to do at the time. And this is an example, you probably can't see it, it's really good, I'm sorry, that of a question, kind of a question and answer thing we went through. And this was around the Kane email, mostly. And so we weren't sure how we wanted to make it available. We were like, well, you know, we can make it available just on site, in the reading room, on a dedicated machine. We really wouldn't have to do anything. We'll just make them sign that super groovy user agreement we have that says they'll promise not to, you know, reveal anything privacy protected. We'll be totally covered. And public services was like, oh no, we don't know if we like that. Or we could make it available. We could put it online. We could make it accessible like it should be. And so we had to ask ourselves some questions, like, do we have, if we're going to do that, if we're going to put it out there for anybody to access, don't we have to process it more? Don't we feel responsibility to make sure that we've done our best? You know, we could talk all day about records management, and we probably will later, but we knew that those records weren't clean, so to speak. We didn't get all perfect records that were publicly available. We had to go through that stuff. And we were told by a board member, I think, he's like, well, legally, if they transferred it, we're covered, because they're not supposed to transfer things that shouldn't be accessible. And we're like, yeah, but ethically, we're a little meh about that. So we said, well, we want to process it. And by we meant, you know, Roger. And so we also had to talk about what that meant for technology, for the IT staff, what we had going on. And also, we thought, well, maybe we could make like a virtual agreement for users and try to figure that out. And I was like, oh yeah, we totally can do that. I was like, oh, I hope we can do that. And so we decided we were going to do it. We were going to figure it out. And we knew as well that these decisions that we made would also potentially impact future records creators, like the governor's office. So we had to, we went to Best Practices Exchange in 2012. And one of our colleagues, actually, Kelly from North Carolina, said, when we said we were going to make the records available, she's like, they're letting you do that? I'm like, yeah, I mean, yeah, you know. So we decided that we were going to go ahead and do it. And our agency head was like, okay, I mean, we'll cover you, and we're there for you, because, you know, we don't get the questions, she gets the questions, right? She takes the fall. So we decided that. We decided we were going to make those Kane emails freely available to the public through Digital, which is our digital asset management system, which nobody else has, it seems. The state records archivist, Roger, would do close processing of the emails. IT staff would start on technical processes, and I actually had a position that had been vacant for a couple years, and I'd had approval to fill it. It was an applications developer, and for web stuff and digital collections, and I had been really hesitant to fill it because I wasn't sure that was the direction we were going to continue to go, and I'm glad I held on to it because I was able to take it and turn it into a digital archives coordinator. So I could get someone in to basically process the technical end of our digital electronic records. We also decided that we were going to be really transparent and open about all the cuckoo that we were about to do and create a website that would talk about our processes and our decisions and things like that. And the executive management team said, okay. So we started. So information technology at the library consists of professional technologists, fantastic, really great. We do have an outside IT agency, but at the library we do have several IT staff inside, and we do have a provision in the Code of Virginia that says the systems and the storage that we manage born electronic archival content on remain ours, so we do have some control there. And then IT Lite, which is me. I'm an archivist who just got into IT somehow, just on the org chart. And so based on the decisions, our initial tasks were to get the archivist set up for processing, figure out the best way to convert PSTs to PDFs for delivery. Remember, this is access. We're not, don't you ask me about preservation. Don't do it. We wanted to find technology and tools to make the process of getting the content out of the PST into a CSV file so we could then import it into digital. We do bulk ingests into digital. And once it would work with Roger's workflow, whatever that was going to be. And then create a virtual user agreement and lock down those actual messages until this user agreed to them. So archival processing was done in Outlook, because those were PST files. And Roger could tell you ad nauseum about his processing that took him a long, it was like, what, I mean, millions of emails you've gone through, or hundreds of thousands, sorry, I'm exaggerating. As I said, our main research tool was Google, where we found a lot of PST converters online. We're like, meh, so we'd download a free trial and mess around with it, see what it did. We settled on two. We went crazy. Susan Gray Page, who is our digital archives coordinator, she and I stood in front of a big whiteboard with like the pros and cons of each one. And we, oh yeah, oh that's what do we really care about? And I said, you know what? Go crazy, buy both. Let's do both. So we got PST Viewer Pro by Encryptomatic, which is a $70 license, and Total Outlook Converter by Cool Utils, which is a pricey $100 for converting the PSTs to PDFs. We needed both of them because PST Viewer Pro handles attachments beautifully. However, there were some like zip files and WAV files that it wouldn't do. A small percentage of the records we had to convert with Outlook Converter. The other thing that was good about PST Viewer Pro is that I'll show you in a minute if I have time. You know, it looks like Outlook when you look in your mailbox, and we could just copy and paste the header information for thousands of them and plop them into a CSV file, and then manipulate that metadata and map it to Dublin Core and other fields that are necessary for digital to understand how to deliver it. So we could just like copy it right in. And bulk rename utility is a free utility that you can get online that does all sorts of cool stuff with file naming. And on my Mac, I'm able to copy a directory of files and paste it into a spreadsheet, but you can't do that in Windows. So she uses this bulk rename utility to just move file names from the directory right over to there. Oh, and there are all these crazy people on the internet who do fantastic things with Excel spreadsheets and formulas. It's crazy. And you think, I have a really hard question, and they've all done it like 400 times. So you can find all sorts of ways to manipulate the metadata to make it nice and pretty for delivery. So in January 2014, we launched our email archive with 66,000 emails. We have 130,000 up to date. Roger is preparing another batch. What is it? Which office? Health and Human Resources. You can see our website, if you haven't looked it over a lot already, at virginiamemory.com. And then we do describe the process in our Look Under the Hood section. And for using the collection, so full text is really awesome, right? Except when it's not, because there's way too much stuff. We have in the same system, we have our Born Electronic State documents, which are all full text searchable as well. Thank God, I mean, you can't look up, 1787 marriage, Accomack County, without getting an annual report from a community college. Like, what the, yeah. So it's hard. So we gave them tips, we give people tip sheets and organize the stuff in certain ways so they could use it. How much time? Am I blowing through this? I'm good. Okay, so I'm gonna show you a couple things real quick. I hope you can see them. You go down. Okay, I just want to give you a couple examples of some things. I don't know if you can really see this too well. How do I do that? Meh. No, I'm good. Oh, nope, I was better a second ago. I don't know if you can really see that, but I can zoom it in a little. So this is, like I said, this is the main view of PST Viewer Pro. It's the same thing. It just gives you all the headings. And it actually can bring up the BCCs, which is really good. So if there's a blind copy, if there are people who are blind copied, we get those names in the emails as well. All right. So that's what that looks like. Come on. Okay. And this is, if I go down a little bit more, this is the top of PDF, the viewer, the thing. And we have options. You have your settings, how you want to convert your PSTs, your messages, and whether you want to have the attachments embedded or attached separately. We chose to have them included. So you just do the settings are, super easy. Was that you? Did you beep? It's okay. I don't mind. And then you just set up your file naming conventions. We used the date timestamp there to name our files, and you just tell it where you want to put it, so to speak, and where the ones that don't work go. I mean, this, like I told you, we call this, we MacGyvered it. We were totally making this up as we went. And Susan Gray really did. I mean, I found the initial tools, but she really did the hardcore testing back and forth, in and out, in and out, in and out, to see how it would work and how it would look. Thank God for her, because it probably wouldn't have happened if I'd had to do it. I'll go down one more. So there you see, this is where we just tell it, like, this is how I want you to build the file name, and then you hit go. And we had some fun. We had this, I mean, it must have taken us like a week to figure out, we would put the dates into the spreadsheet, and Excel would always flip them and convert them, but we needed them to be year, month, day, time, hour, minute, second, so we could have them sort properly, because Digital is Dublin core, so it doesn't understand dates like Mark and blah, 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 blah. So we searched forever trying to figure it out, and it turned out that the Swedes use this format. So when we're in Excel, if we format our date field as the Swedish date time, we're good. We're good to go. That was Susan Gray. I totally didn't figure that out. We tried everything, like Lithuanians. It was crazy. Okay. This shows you real quick. I made that kind of big. This is the highly technical way that we copied. You can see we are copying, highlighting, and copying and pasting. Boom. That's how we did it. And it was kind of cool because it also would tell us if there were attachments with the record. So checked or unchecked meant, whether it had attachments. So for a while we told, it's the type of thing where we're like, okay, well, we could delete all the unchecked and then do a giant find and replace with this line that says this email contains attachments, if we wanted to put that. I mean, that's how highly intellectual we are at this whole thing. Like, we can make this work. We decided we didn't need it, but we had that option. Because, people don't read the metadata anyway, so. This is a really fun thing that'll put you either right to sleep or send you screaming from the room. This is our metadata matrix, where we put together what each column in our export mapped to in Dublin Core, or as a kind of a functional field for Digital, because you have to tell it, this is your file stream. It's this type of object. It's a view. Where do you want to put it, and things like that. Are you all familiar with CSVs and XML files? Okay, good. Because I've talked to people and they're like, what is that? Yeah, but we're good. We got that. So it's telling you how we do it and what we, whether it's going to be visible. If it's not visible, generally, like if you look down at the ones that say no, 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 and then yes, that's because we create a formula to build the creator as cribs bow with from. So we're telling you that that is the creator of the email, that he had sent that. So we're just building it using formulas, building that metadata. Y'all looking at me kind of funny, like they're silly. Okay, and these are the search tips that we created. Oops, how do I get up there? Okay, I created some search tips for us. One of the things, as I mentioned, we felt uncomfortable just making it all open. We had to let people know that there might be some privacy protected. I mean, Roger's good. I mean, he's the man. He's a machine. But you never know what might get by him. Oh, I keep doing that. Sorry. Stupid PDF. So if you go into Digital, and once you get into an item, what do I do? Come back. Come on. Once you get into an item, you'll see, if you can see, there's an arrow that the little PDF has a lock on it. So you can't get to it. You can get to the metadata, but you can't open it. So what we have people do, we tell them, and we do give them a rights note that says that they're required to log in order to view the email. And they only have to do it once. I mean, once you're in there, you're good. There's a login at the top up here, which you can kind of see, a login. And when they get to that, we've created a kind of agreement page that basically says, you know, we worked really hard, we did our best, but sometimes something gets by you. So if you see something you shouldn't, please don't tweet it or print it or write it down and take it with you, and let us know so we can redact it and take it out there. And it's very easy. We don't need any information from them. We just tell them, you know, basically if you log in, you agree. You know, I mean, you know, what, it's our best effort. How are you going to control it? And then they can get in and they can view it. And then the last thing I want to show you real quick is the viewing attachments, which we thought were really cool when you get in there. So there's your metadata. I don't know if you can really see it. Title, creator, format, contributors were people who received the email. Dates, there you see that fantastic, perfectly Swedish date, time. And you'll see this is kind of a view of one of the emails. Looks just like your email. And it'll tell you when there's an attachment right there. And why does it keep doing that? Attachments are appended to the end of the PDF right there. But what's super cool about it, we thought, you know, we take our victories where we can, is that it puts the name of the attachment along the left-hand corner of that page, so you know once you get to your attachment. So that was kind of, I mean, we were pretty pleased with this. We're like, you know what, we can use this, we can do it. Okay, I'll close that sucker up. Just go back to this, boom, okay. And then lastly, our next phase is, you know, we talked a lot about this is not sustainable. Roger is going to drop dead at his desk going through all of these emails. And I'm not taking that much for the team on it. So what are we going to do? But we really have looked at it. I think we've gotten a lot more out of it once we launched. You know, we were like, oh, are people going to look at it? Or people, you know, one guy from Style Weekly in Richmond looked all for the naughty words, and he didn't find much. It was Tim Kaine. There weren't that much. And it wasn't my email. So they laugh because they know it's true. So. But I think it's a good step towards sustainability. I mean, we're learning a lot about how to do it. And from this, we have some projects. This Saturday, Code for Hampton Roads, we've exported all of the public emails into XML files. It exports out of digital in multiple XML files. You have the full text, the technical metadata, the descriptive metadata. We didn't give them all when we gave descriptive, full text, and the PDFs, and the attachment metadata is separate. They're going to be doing a hackathon this weekend for some big national hackathon event some of you may know about. So they'll be using the Kaine. They have normalized it into a big database, and they're offering that up for coders to come up with something groovy with it. And we're also in the beginning stages of an e-discovery project that we have termed at the library Man versus Machine. So we're going to see how a machine stacks up with our man machine over there, Roger. We also are starting, we have a Luratech, have you ever heard of Luratech PDF compressor? Do y'all have that? Well, we have the Born Digital module. And I was doing a COSA survey for digital preservation, and so I was like, oh, what is that thing called? So I went to Luratech's website. Well, they have a PDF-A converter for email now. So I was like, oh, that might be cool. So we're testing that to see if we can convert the email messages to PDF-A, which would be super groovy. And then we're having a lot of conversation about records management and how, I think Roger will talk more about how we actually had a really good relationship with the Kaine administration, right, Don Chalfant from National Archives? And it still wasn't pretty, but I'll let Roger talk more about that. So that's it. Thanks.
So thanks to all of our speakers. That was a lot of fun, and I think we all feel like MacGyver most of the time. So, so we're going to have all of our speakers come and join us, and we're going to have our Q&A. And I think Erin is getting some microphones, and we're going to ask for you to raise your hand and speak into the microphone because this is going to be recorded, and we'll be able to play it back later. Oh, and Abby's also going to help us. So while you all get your thoughts together. I'll ask the first question, and well, maybe the first two questions. So the thing I'm probably most curious about was the normalization of emails. And so we've heard about some folks going to MBox. We've heard about some other folks maybe going to EML. Can you talk a little bit, if you do normalization in your process, what was the distinguishing feature that chose you to choose the format that you have chosen? Lynda?
Okay, can you hear me? Just to repeat, what we're doing at the Smithsonian, we go into the MBox format, and then we take the MBox, and then that is preserved as XML. And we went with MBox because that worked best with the parsing tool that was being developed. And MBox itself is a standard, even though there's various flavors of MBox.
Just to add, there were a number of different very affordable tools out there that were able to take a variety of different proprietary formats and flip them to a handful of normalization tools. And it was very important to us that it wasn't taking Eudora and flipping it to a PST. We wanted something that was standards-based, and so MBox seemed to be the best destination.
The other good thing about the MBox tools that we're using, it was both message save, and we've used Amalgamy a little bit. It works on the folder level rather than giving us separate MBox files, which would have been a management nightmare.
One of the challenges I can think about MBox is that the scale of the files itself, right? Because MBox concatenates all of the files from a mailbox or a folder into one file. So that could get enormous. But what I'm hearing from you is that your available tool set sort of helped you decide that MBox was going to be the appropriate format for you guys.
Yes.
Great. So do we have any questions in the audience? I see one all the way at the back. Oh, they'll come by.
Hey, this question's for Cathy. I appreciate you going into a little detail about the sort of provisions you put in place to guard against unintentional disclosure of content, and I'm wondering if you all had any conversations about that in light of what happened at University of Oregon recently. And if you don't know what happened, I can briefly explain. So what happened is that the University of Oregon gave a cache of emails to a professor who then disclosed some information that was attorney-client privileged and was embarrassing to the university on its website, which there are a lot of politics involved, which we won't get into, unrelated to this actual policy thing, but it led to the termination of 2 people at University of Oregon. So I'm wondering, so maybe you can just talk generally about kind of your strategy or gaming out possible scenarios. What would happen if something were unintentionally disclosed? How do you cover yourself in light of that?
Can I just interject? I believe the people that were let go were the archivists. Is that correct?
Were they?
Yes.
Oh, huh. I guess it would be Sandy Treadway. Yeah, I don't think we've ever, Roger and I are kind of like, we're just the men on the ground, so to speak. Our agency head is well aware of what we're doing. We do have an attorney general, representative from the Office of the Attorney General. I guess when we were going through this process, I mean, Roger could talk to you about attorney-client privilege and all the fun we had with that as well. There is a considerable amount of content that is restricted that he found. So I'm not sure what would happen. I'm pretty sure we wouldn't lose our jobs. I think it would be Sandy. No, I don't think anybody would lose their jobs. I guess basically in our agreement, we also say, you are responsible for, if you disclose this, it's on you versus it being on us. We've done our best to try to get it covered. But, we sent all of that data to Code for Hampton Roads as well. And we did give a little in the email like, hey, because it's actually a newspaper that runs this coding thing they do. And so we kind of said, hey, just if you see something, please let us know. I mean, we worked really hard to cover it and things like that. So I don't know if I answered your, Roger has something to say. That's good.
I was going to mention this when I speak later, but one of the things we did with the email is... is we offered the opportunity to the creators to review before we publicly announced it. And they took us up. Governor Kane's counselor, Larry Roberts, looked through his stuff, and he only found a handful of things that I had missed, and it was very minor stuff. So I think that gives us an extra protection as well, that it's in the system, and we said before we announce it, we'll give them instructions on how to get to it. And no one has said anything other than Larry Roberts that they had a problem with. So I think that helps. And that
Yeah, we're really anxious to see what happens with these, this man versus machine, because, you know, it would be great if something could go through initially and get rid of a bunch of stuff that Roger doesn't have to worry about, but we're not quite sure. I mean, he knows, he is the boss when it comes to modern Virginia government and politics and things like, I mean, he knows who all these people are, he knows what they're up to. There's a lot going on that Roger knows about that I don't know if you could train any kind of machine to find for you that would not, you know, that would really be effective. It's upsetting. I wish there was something, so.
Sure.
And what did you do with the stuff that you redacted out?
Well, some stuff is redacted in the email, like phone numbers, cell phone numbers, and we went through and Susan Gray redacted those, right? Roger located them. We do have restricted, things are restricted that we have separated. We had talked about potentially putting the metadata in and locking down the document for a certain number of years, but we decided that would just be a waste of resources at this point. We do keep everything in CSV files. We love them. That's our effort towards digital preservation. So our XML exports and our CSV files are what we keep secret and hidden and private from the rest of the world. Yeah.
I think that as archivists, we can always agree that our history in the 19th century has been preserved and largely, well, kind of due to the success that we kind of people figure out how to manage the correspondence, and that system, people manage the correspondence actually later on fits our archival system. So we will be able to preserve that 19th century correspondence, because the 19th century, the whole 100 years, they developed that system for people to organize and manage their own correspondence. So I'm just wondering, the question I have is, the more I hear about the presentations, that we're trying to develop a new system away from email system in order to make things happen. So I'm just wondering, when we talk about view emails, like emails, I heard about a couple of times people mentioned, I think that probably the direction, because when I see that PST file viewers, that probably the people will want, but I'm just wondering, my question is, what are the major concerns if we just want to let people see that PST viewers to look at email collections?
So if I can respond first to that, not the only response. It's very important to us to be able to capture the overall structure, and that's why we chose the account approach and why we are following things nested in. But the tools that we looked at, and we looked at a number of tools before we decided to build our own, take a number of different approaches, and one of the approaches that Zena or others take is to take the account and to flatten it. So there may be different levels that the account owner had created, but there's then an index built in the course of flattening that account that lets you find different things and understand the relationships between them. So if your tool flattens it, then that relationship is something else that you have to document.
My question is for pretty much anyone on the panel, but there were a couple of tools mentioned for the conversion for output, and the question in particular was, did you, as part of your processing, change the file names from whatever machine-generated file name was with the object, you know, at various points in the process? That could be changed along the way, but in terms of just a user-friendly description if you're delivering content to your reference audience. Did you make a conscious decision to literally name the file something, or did you rely upon the description and in the metadata part of your operation?
You're looking at me, aren't you? Yep. Yeah, we decided to rename the files, which actually get renamed anyway when they get put into digital. They rename the version that's there. But that's why we keep the CSV files, because we have, I think the original, when you take a PST and download, or just take an email, it's like the subject or something is the name of the file, I think. When you save an individual, Don would know, the National Archives. And so, yeah, we chose to rename it for this purpose, but we can always get back to it, because part of the problem is that, people are really bad at managing their email. I don't know if you knew that. And so, just in case you didn't, that was my pearl of wisdom for you all for today, that you can't, in one big ingest, you can't ingest files that are named the same thing, right? So we had to find a unique way to do it. And interestingly, there were no problems with the date stamp, the date time format. So that's why we did that for ingest. Does that make sense? That we did do? Yes.
You came up with a naming schema for the file set?
Yeah, based on the date time of the email. Yep.
In our case, we've retained the source name of the PST file, and we have not changed any of the message, subject headers or subject lines, anything like that, and that's all in our CSV file as well.
Don't you love those? I love CSV files.
Yes, they're
I do,
good.
I love them. Sorry.
Except they can get too big, too.
They're huge, yeah.
But what we're actually tracking with regards to our accession documentation is email account. So we look inside to find the messages, but the object that we have is the email account.
And we still keep that too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of the metadata.
And in some cases, we have to go in ourselves and grab the account, and so then we'll assign it the name of the account holder and, what year these emails may be based on.
You mentioned the EAXS schema, and I was wondering what that's based on. Is it based on the MBox format, or is it based on an email standard like RFC 5320?
So we started with RFC 822, which then became 2822, and now is
5322.
5 something or other. We really wanted to keep it true to that. The one problem with following the email standards that get created by the internet group there is that they follow behind the proprietary system's functionality. But that, I think, is just endemic of software and standards.
So the second part is metadata for describing the email collections. I think you mentioned the Dublin core, and just kind of a general thing, how do you identify what metadata is appropriate, and how does it relate back to other types of electronic records that you're describing?
For us, with our descriptive stuff access, well, Dublin core is basically the delivery metadata schema for digital. So we just mapped all the header information to the proper Dublin core fields. I mean, the Library of Virginia has a long history of bastardizing MARC for some digital object delivery. So, but Dublin core seemed to fit it really well for what we were doing. Yeah, and we've done a few other electronic records stuff for Mark Warner, and it seems to, it works pretty much the same way. It works fine.
Yeah, for SERP, we went ahead and used Dublin core with our METS files.
For capturing the entire inbox, were you able to capture deleted emails, spam, that sort of thing? And if so, how do you handle those differently?
So we want people to weed their accounts before they come to us, which does not always happen. So if it's a PST that I'm able to go in and create, working with our IT department, we're not taking that information. We don't want the spam, and we don't want the deleted accounts, the deleted email. We really don't want their Groupon specials and the CNN news alerts that they're getting. And if it's email that is already coming to us, that's already in a PST form, we will go ahead and leave those out. They won't get processed. It's possible they'll get transformed into the MBox, but they're not going to go through the parser to create the XML. And then we'll document what was done.
Just as a word of caution, we have a number of users who have created their own trash folder, and it's not really trash. It's because they have it auto-delete when they close the client, and they are not really sure that they really want to delete it. So sometimes it requires an extra look before we decide.
That's true. Yeah.
And I would say some of the readings that we had to do prior to today, there was a lot of talk about how to get rid of the spam. I say someone needs to save the spam. There's going to be a wealth of cultural information within people's spam mailboxes that would be beautiful for a hackathon, don't you think? Yeah, a big collection of spam. I just think in 50 years, someone will want that information to see what was being said. It's like the back of the dime novels, right, from long ago? Yeah, so save the spam.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we should get T-shirts. Let's get T-shirts.
Save the spam.
You know, you have to understand how the library, we're working with the governor's records. So the governor in Virginia only has a 4-year term. He cannot get reelected. So can you imagine what it's like for us to get in there and have effective conversations with them about preparing their content and managing their records? Oh, and they're running the Commonwealth at the same time. And Virginia Tech has happened, and there are layoffs. There's a lot going on. So, I mean, usually, despite all of our best efforts, at the end, it's this mad dash, us working with our VITA information, the Virginia Information Technology Agency, to get the transfer. So, you know, talking about digital preservation, like when you see Roger's numbers, we don't want to keep a huge percentage of the content that gets transferred to us. I mean, if it was clean when we got it, we would probably focus a lot more on preservation. But I can't justify, you know, getting all this stuff preservation ready without going through it. That would just be a huge waste of resources. And it's not just my excuse. I mean, it's a real reason for that. So, we do appreciate some of the non-record material that comes to us. You know, it can get boring in the archives, but it's kind of fun. But anyway, yeah.
Hi. First of all, I just want to thank you all so much for this fabulous panel. It's been very informative and really great. Thank you. Rick, this question is for you. You mentioned that there's a 15-year embargo on emails. Is this from the time that a member of the Smithsonian retires? And the other question is, has that ever been challenged?
Rick's looking at me. Can I answer?
So it is a 15-year embargo from the point in time that we acquire it. And the only challenges to that have been litigation-based. And I think I'll stop there.
Sure.
Greetings. I have another question. Have you guys ever been challenged with or thought through the process of authenticity in terms of how do we say that this is authentic? How do we know that this hasn't been manipulated with or has been subject to foul play? Has that been a discussion that you've had or anything that you've been considering? Because obviously as we're moving to this digital realm, one thing that in my career that I've always been concerned about is when we go to this digital realm, how do we know it is what it is and something hasn't been subject? I'm just curious if you've had that conversation or if that's anything that you have any wisdom that you can bring any light on.
Let me jump in first because I realized I have another comment for Jan's question. All of the senior managers, that 15-year embargo with regards to their material is not just for email, it's for all of their materials. So it's not a special exception. With regards to the SERP approach and that format that we worked together with North Carolina to develop, each of the individual messages has its own hash, as well as the account as a whole. We've not been challenged with regards to authenticity, but we were very concerned with that, and that's why we took that approach.
Another benefit that we have as well is that we're dealing with email of the Smithsonian. So we're not typically working with outside organizations. I mean, obviously, people are getting email from the outside, but, you know, we feel pretty confident that this is good stuff. And again, we can look at those internet headers and see if there are funny things going on if we suspect something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we have talked about it, and since we're not as smart as they are, we kind of figured that our method was to have transparency on our end. We are, you know, what we put up, if somebody, you know, they can't get to it. We have multiple versions of things, but we also feel like, you know, our authenticity for paper is, you know, paper is as changeable in many ways, and we have been the trusted repository for the paper forever. So we're going to decide at this point, before we can go all high tech and everything, that, you know, our position and our responsibility as the archives of the Commonwealth of Virginia, for now, should be good enough for people to understand that, you know, we're not messing with it. My greater concern is that there's some shenanigans that occur before we get it, quite honestly. So, dang it. Yep.
I have a couple of thoughts about, or more questions about, like, issues of scale, right? So have any of you run into issues of scale with your tool sets? And new question about tools for automated redaction when the data is not necessarily structured as clearly as a telephone number or social security number. And then finally, I keep thinking about, we all have that button in the library, in our Outlook, that says save as PDF, right? But so if you save this email as PDF, you tend to lose all of that header information if you save it as PDF. And at least I have not been able to figure out, how do you do that? I mean, it's only one at a time. If you did it as a batch, maybe that would help you for your access purposes. So I'm just kind of curious if folks have been dealing with any of those issues, and if you could talk about that.
So when we concluded SERP in 2008, the largest email account we dealt with was 1.5 gigs, which seemed huge at the time. And now we're getting email accounts that are, you know, 26 gig, 30 gig, and multiple PST files. So the parser has had, you know, some issues with just dealing with this scale. It continues to run, but it's slow. With the new tool we've been working on, like I said, we've done some initial testing, and I feel like it's working a little faster. So that's a benefit.
And is that tool open source?
Yes, and
it will be.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be releasing it.
Thank you.
So the speed uptick when in your last test comparatively was half the time?
I think it was probably about 3 times faster, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah.
I'd say this is an area that the smaller of the smallest organizations have the advantage in, is that we are dealing with a smaller scale. And they do have the ability and the time to go through these in a more detailed level and to store them without worrying about a large scale. Now, obviously, over time that will change, but fortunately, folks like you are going to figure it out first, and we are happy to ride your coattails.
Well, and I want to add that we're not the only folks who have tools out there.
Sure.
I see Glenn and Peter are here today, and they've been working on ePad, which is a wonderful project, and I don't want to steal their thunder, because hopefully they'll have some opportunity to talk about what they've been doing. But there's lots of potential there with that tool for the redaction that you've been talking about.
Do we have any final questions before we take our morning break? I see a hand.
Glenn?
Glenn?
Hi. I just was really curious about sort of the user scholar end, and I wondered how many people have used, you know, for instance, the Kane Archive or any of the others, and what their reaction has been, and maybe what have they asked for that you haven't been able to provide yet.
Yeah, that we haven't been. Well, Roger could probably. You've done some work with the McAuliffe administration using the Kane email. They frequently use our web archiving content as well. We've had a really good response. I can't tell you the numbers, but I think we've had, I want to say it was like 10,000 hits on the Kane email collection in the first year, which is a huge number of hits. I mean, we're fantastic, but not everybody knows it. So the use is relative, right? So we had a lot. We've also got a lot of recognition from our colleagues and from open government people as well, which I think has been we won the Virginia Coalition for Open Government Award in the government category this past year. So it's actually I think access is using the stuff, but access is also just like the whole intellectual understanding that this stuff is freely available and people can use it and things like that. Now, I did say to the state librarian, I was like, I wonder what we're going to do for our encore now. How do we keep it going? So yeah, so access is a lot of different things, but people seem to be using it. And not just the Style Weekly guy who looked for dirty words. And we did it better than he did, by the way.
One of the user comments that the very small archivist, she's a regular sized person, but the archivist at the very small organization noted was users were saying, well, there's a link in this email that no longer works. Right. So what she has actually done, again, because the scale is smaller and she can, is she's pointed Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, to crawl those so that she can point people in that direction. So,
yeah, that's good. Good for her.
We do know that there are tools out there, and so we hope that Glenn and Peter will talk about the ability to approach email accounts with entity clouds and things like that, which really allow people to create their own lexicons with which to approach the material. And I think that there's a lot of potential with that approach.
And this will be our last question.
Don Chalfant, Archives, formerly of Library of Virginia. What expectations do you have for the next email batch on Bob McDonnell, I guess, and how is it larger, and when is Roger going to be done with that?
Roger, next week. Roger's on it. The McDonnell records are challenging and many. We haven't yet begun. We have done some cleanup on some of the content that we got with that. You know, they had that little minor legal snafu in Virginia, where I think, as Roger said, they held on to a lot of stuff because at a certain point they were afraid to get rid of things. So we think that there's a lot in there that we probably don't need. So yeah, that's huge. I have no idea. Meh. Roger, I'm sure, well, he won't be coming into my office to tell me that Bob McDonnell is running for another position probably. So there won't be that same urgency we had with Tim Kaine, I would imagine.
So please join me in thanking all of our panelists, our first panelists.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.